Going live. Let's see if it works. Sometimes this. Oh, we're live.
Yeah,
We've had issues before where the live stream didn't work. Hey, everybody.
Hey, guys.
Welcome to Drinking Leather. I've got Esteban here with me today. Esteban is my favorite person in the room right now. And often in the room I'm in all day first. Yeah. All right. So Drinking Leather today, this is our 4th episode. And I've really enjoyed doing these because I have a low level of understanding of beer and drinks in general, but I have a higher understanding of leather. So it's great for me to learn from you guys about some of these beers. And we're going to blow your mind with leather chemistry today. So
we'll try. We'll try it out.
Let me get you closer to this one. So topics today, we just got this beer from our local Binnies. It's our local, what are we seeing in today's episode? I'm glad you asked because we picked up this beer today. This is the Pipeworks Pistachio Jones Dog. Check out this sweet dog.
It's a young one.
And we asked Esteban and I are both huge fans of porters and stouts. So we asked the guy at the liquor store, what's a good thing to check out. So this is a milk stout with cacao nibs, lactose, which, are you into lactose?
I mean, sure. I'm not lactose intolerant. So
yeah. All right. Vanilla beans and natural pistachio flavor. You're still finishing a Guinness. So we'll get to this in a second. And then I asked Esteban to bring his boots. So tell us what these are. These are really cool.
It's Oak Street Chrome Excel Black. Been having them since they got hired at Horween. And they've just been going at it. Just a couple 2-3 polishes. And
couple 2-3.
They've been fine. I've been dancing the night away with these. So they're still going good.
These are your dancing boots?
These are my dancing boots. Oh.
Actually, I really like the sock liner they have in there with the Oak Street.
Yeah, the only difference is that you have to unstrap them at the end of the night, and that's a little difficult. Sometimes you just kind of sit there and forget.
If you've had too many Guinnesses.
Too many Guinnesses and you forget to unstrap them, but that's another story.
And then the last thing that we're going to chat about, which is a huge topic, the huge topic is leather tanning. And we did before we sat down here on this live stream, we did a recording together, and I learned so much from Esteban, so I'm really excited to get into that. The goal is going to be to try to explain many of the steps in the tanning process and actually to clarify the initial tanning process. We're talking the base tannage. This is chrome tanning and this is vegetable tanning. Right. There are other types of tanning. And you blew my mind, so we'll get to that too. But before I start here, one other thing we want to say is the reason that we're doing this live is because we want to talk to you and we want your questions. And I want you to try to stump Esteban with chemistry because I don't think it's possible, and I'd be mind blown if you were stumped. The other thing is in the past I've had some issues with audio. In my headphones here, it's sounding pretty good, but please let me know if it sounds weird or if it looks weird or if anything's strange. So let's crack into this. I got my ridiculous Cordovan bottle opener, of course. And we're going to dig into the Pipeworks Pistachio Jones Dog. What is this again? A milk stout. This is 8.5%. It's a nice little starter. I guess I'll let you finish your Guinness. But I'll get into this. And what are you guys drinking out there in internet land? There we go. Looking good.
See Big Bobby P's here.
Where?
Big Bobby P.
Oh, hey. Hi, Marco and Dan, my business partner. Good to see you, Dan. And Vegavis is back. Awesome to have you again. And I'm sure I'll learn some more stuff from you tonight. And Ray, thanks for coming to hang out.
Charles is here. It was good.
All right.
How's it taste?
So it doesn't smell it. It doesn't smell like pistachio.
Yeah.
It smells like a coffee stouty kind of beer. And it doesn't overwhelmingly taste like pistachio either.
It was either that or the peanut butter and jelly, and I wasn't really thinking about that.
Yeah, the guy at the guy at the local liquor store had another Pipeworks beer that was peanut butter and jelly, which he said is really hard to get peanut butter flavor in the beers. So again, I don't really know why that is because I don't understand the details of beer. I just know what I like. This tastes great. I'm excited for you to try this when you're done with that. But
for sure.
It doesn't blow me away with pistachio.
Interesting thought too.
It doesn't really taste like pistachio at all.
It's supposed to be like an ice cream nut.
It doesn't taste like ice cream either, but check out this dog. It makes me think I'd be tasting dog head ice cream. I don't know. All right, you guys, you're drinking Aloha Sculpin IPA. I've had Sculpin, but I don't know what the Aloha one is. Is that like a pineapple Sculpin? Because I know they do crazy Sculpins. Monkey Shoulder blended single malt whiskey. Dang, John.
That's a good one. On the rocks, hopefully, right? Yeah.
Dang, that sounds great. Yeah, this is good. I don't get a lot of pistachio, so it's just like a really good stout. I think you'll like this. All right. So let's go on to. Chris is drinking Duclaw. Are you? Oh, Duclaw and Infamous have peanut butter beer, disgusting. And it's disgusting. Yeah. You know, I had the. I know Chris. By the way, hi Chris. I know that you have had Victory at Sea, and I tried the peanut butter Victory at Sea. It's fine. Hello. All right, let's go to let's talk about your boots. So if I have on a guest, my new thing that is going to be to ask them to bring on something that they love, something that they've worn has gotten better. And it's a little biased because we both work at Horween, but tell us about your boots you got there. And I'll hold up ones for everybody to see.
Well, actually, these were given by, the famous Nick Horween. So just right when I started there, he's like, you know what, just, here's some shoes. And I'm like, that's pretty great. It's got them on. At the time, I didn't know what they were. It was like, I know it's leather, but now, a couple of years later, it's a Chrome XL shoe. It's been through there.
Do you know what the sole is called?
It's
I do.
Darnite, or I believe I haven't let me look at the bottom.
It's spelled like Danite, but it's pronounced Danite, I believe. Do you like the soles? Because I have a couple boots.
They feel nice. They feel slick. That doesn't feel too compressed. It just
feels slick. Yeah. What do you mean by slick? Like you're gonna fall?
It all depends on the sock. Because if you have dress socks, it's fine. But if you put regular standard, then wool, it's gonna have friction. But I like how it just kind of molds on the feet.
Yeah, they have. Nice. That's actually a really good call. And I don't want to mess with your boots too much, but on the insides of these, you can see it perfectly. There's a veg sock liner on the inside, and something that we'll probably talk more about later, and we've talked about in other episodes, is that veg tan leathers tend to mold to whatever you put on it, especially when you introduce heat and pressure and time. So I'm imagining these are very comfortable. I've noticed, so we had people talk about soles in this chat before, but I really like the Danite soles. I feel like they're really grippy, so I was kind of surprised that you said they're slippery. But people have called me out saying, like, if you hit one of these smooth parts of the soles, actually this is pretty grippy on the heel, but it's kind of slippery if you hit an edge.
Right.
But anyways, so were these are irregular or with the break on them? Is that like why did you get these? They're from
well, they came from Nick, and I was like, it's a gift. It's pretty great. I mean,
yeah.
And so then from there, I just kind of like I always thought because I'm using the past boots and buying leather boots, I would see that they would break apart and they would start ripping apart. And then when he gave me these, I was just like, all right, let's start them off. But only it's withstood the test of time. Like I haven't seen this guy give me an issue. It hasn't ripped.
Yeah.
It's still intact, just how I got it. Just a little polish here and there, and then that's how I started noticing the quality difference of leather. You see the pricing points on these shoes, and at first I was like, "There's no way I'm not going to buy that. There's no way I'm going to pay this." But now I'm seeing it, and it's like you're buying something, you're investing in something that's going to last you.
So what I like about Black Chrome XL is the sections where it wears in. And you can sort of see. So this is an unlined boot. Chris says Danite seems more slippery than Vibram. Yeah, I think that's correct. Because the Vibram stuff, or I don't know if there's a specific type of Vibram sole, but most of them have those like big lug soles. But this, I'm imagining this is really comfortable because it has no liner. So it's just one. You can see here, this is the back side of the Chrome Excel, and this is the front side of it. So there's no liner against this leather. I'm imagining it's like really soft and comfortable. But what I like about the black Chrome Excel that is not mill dyed, what's really cool about it is when it wears in and scuffs, you start to see some of those like lighter undertones. And I've seen some crazy pictures of, there was somebody that posted on Instagram a Viberg shoe that they've really scuffed the crap out of them.
Wow.
And then they polished it back and it just looks really, really cool. So these are cool, man. Yeah. I don't have any black pairs of boots.
In 10 years, I'll let you know how they come up. But they're still there. Nothing changed.
Hey, Stephanie, I'm glad you made it. Thanks everybody for joining us. And if you're just joining us, this is Esteban Perez.
What's up?
Esteban's my coworker at Horween. He is, well, why don't you just tell us about your background a little bit?
Well,
so I can drink.
I came from UIC and I got a biochem degree there. So it's, coming into the world of leather, it's mind blowing. I never would have thought that this is where I would be. After I graduate, I'm just like, I'm gonna be in the lab, just all doing all this stuff,
just
beakers and mixing, and then that's it. And now
Bunsen burners and beakers.
Now seeing where I've come and seeing this is a whole new uncharted world. The chemistry is impeccable. It's like some of the stuff you haven't really seen, or it's still in development ages. Like some stuff has obviously been set because we've been doing it for years, but the chemistry is always tweaking. You're always changing things to try to make a better product or a newer product, or it's always a market of constant pushing and renovating and reinventing. Right. So it's pretty great. So it's stimulating, which at the end of the day, you want to work in a place that you're always stimulated, never stagnant and doing the same and repetitive sort of thing.
Well, we had dinner before this also, and what you were teaching me over pizza was really cool. It's almost like your specific training has high relevance to leather tanning because of that organic is it organic chemistry that you're?
Well, biochem is like it's a mesh of all different the chemistry that you come in and you're blending all that biological systems, and you kind of understand the chemistry of that. So, coming with the leather, tying into the tanning, you're dealing with proteins, and that's what biochemists do. They deal with proteins all the time. And seeing the biggest protein in skin is it's collagen. I have it right here. You have it right there. It's right over there. It's just a matter of how you transform that collagen and bind it.
Right,
is what transforms it from raw.
So let's just dive right in then, because again, we recorded ourselves before this, so you'll see a more formal video than this live show about leather tanning, and it went a little long actually, so we'll cut it down. But there's so much stuff to talk about with leather tanning, and what I really want to get at, the sort of crux of the issue is, why do we tan leather, and what are the chemical components, or what is the chemistry that defines leather itself? So I think the best thing to do to start it off is just to ask you, why do we tan leather? Like, what's the point?
Well, the point is there's multiple answers to that question. Depends on what your perspective is. If you want to repurpose something and not go as a waste product in the world, you use it for repurposing it as a tool. But in essence, it's to make something stronger and transform it into something that will last you. It will become everlasting.
Yeah.
Having something that decays, it's organic matter, and you're blending whatever type of tanning agent you want, you'll make it something that will indeed last.
Right.
And then on top of that, you're making it stronger. So it's essentially you're building a tool. And so I think that's at the end of the day, that's what that is. It's just a matter of transforming something that you'll be able to use from day to day.
Yeah, I think I can, if you'll allow me to try to expand, because I think the other really cool thing that is sort of the challenge of every manufacturer is to take something that is infinitely variable, like a hide of a steer or a bison or a horse, and to take this infinitely variable thing and turn it into the same thing every time with the same characteristics. And to me, that's what tanning is you're trying to take this infinitely variable hide and make it the same thing every time and do it over and over and over. So let's go through the tanning process. It's a process that takes how long? 3 days total, or longer depending on how you tan it?
It just really depends on your overall output. But if you just want to get from raw to
Well, let's talk chrome tanning then. So for those of you that don't know, there are many types of tannages, and there's also retannages, but we're going to focus really, I don't know what the technical term is, but I would call it the base tannage. These are things like chrome tanning, vegetable tanning. There's other things called glutaraldehyde tannages.
Aluminum, titanium, these different, all these are just essential, just products that you're trying to bind to your skin in this case, or your hide, depending on what it is. Skin can be a sheep, something small, lower than 3 meters high. That's considered a hide. You know, it's different terminologies, but essentially, depending on what you're trying to bind to and what the overall output is. Like you veg tan, you'll get different outputs of what you're trying to achieve as opposed to chrome.
Yeah.
And they're both going to last long, but it's just a matter of what are the characteristics you're looking for. For a brighter characteristic, or shorter, or stronger for heat than others, or hydrophilic, hydrophobic, water resistance or not. All of these factors come into play.
Why is it that I tend to see 2 types show up more than others? Why is it that I always see chrome tanned and veg tanned, do you think?
Well, I think it's probably have to do with in terms of how practical it is at the time that it was being developed. Because I mean, just from the infancy, I would imagine veg tan was the thing that started it all, got the ball rolling. And then when you started interacting with fat liquors and all these dyes, that's when also you start getting that wave of chrome. And you saw that, a lot of these manufacturers just kept going with that wave. But just the nature itself of chrome is pretty nice, because it's just that transition metal. That's what brought my shirt here.
Yeah.
And as I repeat myself,
I was blind to your nerdery.
It's a Star Wars reference, and so it instead of having all the atoms, it has different, like, Jedis, the rebels, and all that stuff.
But you got Jawa.
But right here would be transition metal. So a lot of the, like, oxygen, carbon, all this stuff is in other sections in the non-metals. But that particular metal has orbitals, and so orbitals, getting to the chem stuff, it's kind of like, it's just shows you how much it can react. So it doesn't obey certain rules that normal atoms would behave. So by having that exploit, that's why you have chrome being able to uptake a lot of the collagen and stuff like that. And it would probably do the same thing with the other transition metals, but it's just more cost to manufacture, so it drifts. It's probably more because we've been doing it for so long.
I see
that the supply has been much more efficient with them.
That makes sense. And you mentioned something interesting about the veg tan, is that sort of like started it all off. Like the world started making vegetable tan leathers 6,000 years ago, thousands of years ago. I don't know if they actually know a date,
right.
But the technology of vegetable tanning is relatively old, whereas the technology of chrome tanning and these other, what would you call it, metal types?
Transition metals.
Yeah, the chrome tanning is hundreds of years old. I think it's about 200 years old. So before we get on to the process here, because I really want to break down every step of the way with Esteban, because like I said, I know a lot about this stuff, but I learned quite a bit from Esteban about literally every step of the way. So before I get to that, let's take a look at what you guys are talking about. Good to see everybody. And can you tan leather with mercury is a really interesting question.
That is an interesting concept. But the thing is, mercury, you already know by default that with thermometers, you've been opting out from not using mercury in your thermometers because of the carcinogenic, properties it has. So the thing is, depending on the metals, in this case, if it's mercury, even if you could be able to bind it, it's just, you're not going to want mercury on your leather on you all the time, just because of the toxicity. That's why a lot of the metals that get removed are not only because of cost effectiveness, but because of toxicity. So
I mean, if I started a metal band, I think I would wear mercury tan leather. We got another question here. Horween ever considered lizard or crocodile skins? I can answer this one for you, John. That is not an emphasis that Horween has. We don't tend to do exotics. I think the closest thing that you would see to an exotic from Horween is the shell cordovan. And it's not I don't know what exotic really means, but I don't know how you would define that, but we don't do any lizard or croc. And actually, interesting on that point, I was asking Chris Kolblinger, the tanner from Horween, because I was totally fascinated by tanning at that moment. I said, what's the hardest animal to tan? And he was actually saying that fish and aquatic animals are really hard to tan. So
I would imagine probably just because of the density.
They're so delicate. Yeah. We got other questions here. Isn't chromium insanely poisonous too, or in a different way? I guess that's a good question.
And when it comes to chrome, I mean, You're gonna have the interesting part of it is that you see a lot of Chrome 3 is the base that you're using to tan, but Chrome 6, which is the more infamous one that you always hear about, Chrome being poisonous, and that is a carcinogen because I mean, what it does is that you have to understand the chemistry of it. That Chrome 3, when it says 3, it just means the oxidation state. So that means that how many in your D block inside the Chrome, how much the d orbital, that's how much electrons are passing in there. And so the more it becomes oxidized, less or more electrons are filling in that void. So now you're having a charged up, atom. So the poisonous part of Chrome is that you're consuming it. So you breathe it in, it goes in, and then eventually your body reduces it. So it goes from 6 because you're losing, let's say you're reducing, you're gaining the electrons that come down with your oxidation state. Eventually it goes back to 3. And now the problem is that 3 gets inside your cells and it can actually start to reprogram your DNA, causing mutations. So it's because of the oxidation of you oxidizing it to raise up that oxidation number. It's what causes it to be carcinogenic because it enters your body. But in a normal state, it wouldn't enter your body that way.
So let's get really clear about Chrome and Horween. And maybe before we do that, should I pour you some beer?
that'd be great. Yeah.
Yeah. What type of Chrome does Horween use? Because I know it's the stable one. It's the 3.
They use Chrome 3 sulfate.
And I think every tannery,
a lot of tanneries, if not all of them that are using Chrome, are using that one because just the nature of it. That's one of the more abundant ones. But you get oxidation just by the nature of not properly doing it. If you're bleaching before it, if you're adding a lot of acidity into your tanning, you can increase this chances of it causing oxidation. So, I mean, it's easy manageable, but if you have the right protocols to prevent it.
Well, let's talk about the protocols because I think Chris brought up like a super important safety feature or a safety concern. We should talk about how Horween has internal audits for detecting Chrome, but we also have external audits for people checking our effluent and all that stuff too. So do you know much about that, about the protocols for the testing and the auditing?
Yeah, an example is just RSL testing, so restricted substance listing. So we do it every day. So when you release it to someone, you have to send out testing outside to make sure that everyone is up to speed with the test. And so we get the results, and then from there it shows you that the results not detectable.
We're testing directly for Chrome 6.
Yes, so you definitely have your outside sourcing for sure to definitely see those tests.
And then is it every 18 months we get an outside?
We're actually we have the protocol every 12 months.
12 months.
Try to keep it as relevant as possible because the last thing you want is issues, and that's the most important part is being vigilant with this stuff. It's not going back to the question that Chrome 6, Chrome is poisonous. It's a little arbitrary, but it could be poisonous if it's not properly executed. But that's why we have these tests and these protocols in place.
Shell cordovan is as exotic as you really need. I think that's a good call, Stephanie. Although it's the coolest, and maybe just because it's so foreign to me. I don't know if you've ever seen stingray leather.
I'm not,
but it's wild. If you guys are checking this out, you should check out. Just Google search stingray leather, and it has this really cool jewel like in the hide of the stingray, and it's like what is it? It's kind of like a piece of cartilage, I guess. And it's this really, and often you'll see the tanneries will tan it so it stays a different color. The stingray is really cool to look at. All right. So we got Marco says, I hear color 4 is rare. Is that true? If so, why? That's a really good question. Color 4 happens to be my favorite shell cordovan color. I just like that it's a medium brown with some of that more interesting like red undertones. And it's rare because it is not often ordered. And we can make these colors, especially the not light colors like natural, which are harder to get. But the colors like color 4 are often easy to make. So the challenge with getting a lot of that is that customers don't tend to order it. So if the larger customers like Allen Edmonds or Alden really wanted color 4 and that was their staple color and they ordered it, we'd probably see a lot more color 4. So that's a really good question too. It's rare just because it's not ordered often. Esteban sounds like you'd make an excellent supervillain. Yeah, I think you know too much. That's a good one. All right. Good to see you, Honores, by the way. So let's go on to, so we got what why we tan leather. We're trying to make it stable so it doesn't rot and turn into dirt. We're also trying to make it strong. So there are many steps in that process to tan the leather. And again, specifically for chrome tanning, which many of the stages are the same for many types of tanges, but let's start off with the first stage of chrome tanning. So we get, why don't you just start us off from the hides?
Well, assuming your hides are salted.
We'll start with,
they come in the
as we do at Horween.
Yeah, so you come in, you're already dealing with putrefaction already. That's your biggest target. That's the target you're trying to. That's your enemy is rot. You don't want by the time you start trying to tan and everything's already rotted out because it's not going to tan properly. So that's what your first thing is, to try to have hides that are salted but still not rotted. That's what you do the checks over there at Horween. After that, you rehydrate. So you have to reanimate all of it. So you have to start washing off the salt. You have to start washing all the dung, all that stuff. That's the stuff, all the nasty stuff. So you run the first one, the dirt soak. The dirty soak is what it's called. After that, the second soak, you start adding your detergents and whatnot, your enzymes. You can also add some biocides in order to kill the bacteria, because that's the enemy that you don't want. You're trying to get this leather prepped and catered like a nice veal that's been marinated and ready to veal. So then what you're doing is that essentially that's the target. The target is, I said it already, the collagen. Collagen is that big protein. It's massive. It's just a big bundle of helices of all that stuff inside the leather. And so once you finish your soak, now you introduce your line, right? That would be the second phase.
Okay, so first stage, correct me if I'm wrong, we received the hide. It has it looks like it came right off the animal, but it's just been salted. It's slightly cured, but not really. If you were to leave it out, it would eventually turn into dirt. So the first stage that we're introducing to the leather, or to the hide at this point, is to remove all the salt and all the nasty,
and introduce water. You need to hydrate it.
Okay.
It's a jerky. Think of it as you just got jerky.
Got it.
You can't do anything. It's gonna break. It's all stiff. You need to reanimate it and you need something that's flexible and at least in that aspect, that you can actually utilize, and you want it to clean properly. And once that's been taken care of, then you proceed to your.
So that's called the soak. So if somebody's, by the way, if you want to look in YouTube, we were taking a look at trying to critique some websites earlier, but it looks like YouTube has a pretty legit
we have a question as well, actually.
Some good knowledge on excuse me, I said YouTube and Wikipedia. Go on Wikipedia and you can follow along these steps. The step we're on right now is called soaking. All right, Stephanie's got a good question. If I may ask, what happens to those dense collagen fibers when the hide is chrome tanned versus veg tanned? We can get into that, but let's do it now. That's a big topic.
So essentially, the mechanisms are more or less the same. But what you're dealing with is a different species of chemicals. So chrome, you can attach to a ligand of collagen. So collagen is a big fiber, like I said. It has amino groups and carboxyl groups, and so one's positively charged, one's negatively charged. Which being the carboxyl is negatively charged. The metal is going to bind to that ligand of collagen. And so then from there, it starts to do a network, because it, again, going back to the transition metal, it can bind and disobey the octet rule, which is in chemistry, your 4 pair electrons. This one, you can bind multiple ligands. So it makes this web. And so it starts doing this process. And so then and going back to the original question versus veg tan you're using, instead of chrome, you're using polyphenols. So polyphenols will start to bind. Polyphenols, like if you also Google search polyphenol, it's like a little benzene ring with an OH.
What's a benzene ring?
Benzene ring is a 6 ring. It's a closed circle of 6 carbon, and then it has resonance. So resonance meaning that it shares electrons. It delocalizes them and stuff like that. Anyway, it's a ring. And it's an organic one, and the oxygen part of it will also bind to the same ligand that collagen would bind. So in that case, you can definitely have binding and tanning, but it takes longer, because it's it doesn't take as much reactivity compared to chrome. Chrome, like I said, has multiple ligands, as opposed to the polyphenol just does one at a time, and that's why they slowly take one.
Can we spitball numbers here? So to bind chrome to the collagen, it takes about a day. Less? 12 hours?
Yeah, but 12 hours.
And to bind to bind, what's the substance in the veg?
Polyphenols.
To bind polyphenols to the collagen takes a month.
Weeks, yeah, roughly.
Depends
Obviously,
on the
it
tannage.
depends on the method as well. Because I mean, if you're dealing with cordovan, they're pit tanned, so they slowly you have static tanning, like just sitting there marinating, as opposed to you have a drum in chrome
Beating it into it.
It's beating it in. You have heat. You have all these factors that are driving your tanning to go through.
Yeah.
But hopefully that answers your question.
Stephanie, that's a good question. And by the way, Stephanie's my favorite. Esta was so cool. Ray is correct. All right, we got another one from Tim Geist. I was a chemistry major in college, but can't even read a periodic table now. I do now, however, that I'm getting a Fat Herbie Color 8 Chrome Excel for Father's Day. That's awesome, Tim.
Just get yourself one of these shirts. I'm not promoting, but you always look at it, look in the mirror. That's what I'm talking about.
Do you have that memorized?
No, God, no.
No, okay.
In chemistry,
they
make you learn all of these atoms, the protons, the electrons in general chemistry. But by the end, when you're doing biochem, they just give you the sheet and your test. At half the time, if you don't really understand the mechanisms, that periodic table is not going to help. It's just going to be sitting there. So it's good. It's a good reference to
okay.
And there's trends depending on because if you go down, they have your. I don't want to get into all that.
Yeah, well, we got a tiny bit off of topic here, but I'm going to link you guys the if I can copy and paste. Control C, right? I'm going to link you Wikipedia. So if you scroll down to the section that starts with Beamhouse Operations, we're at Beamhouse Operations on the tanning page for Wikipedia. We just did soaking. And this is what Esteban just described really well. So I want to ask you about liming, because it's kind of a weird concept. It's kind of nasty, right?
Not really. I mean, okay. After you cleaned your leather and after you just soaked it and you try to do an antibacterial cream more or less, and more in a nutshell, you try to maintain that there's no bacteria there. Now your next goal is that your first goal, your goal is to remove hair. Like the hair itself is still kind of embedded, the grain where it is still kind of, because it's just barely being rehydrated. So what you need to increase the pH, because by increasing the pH, you'll start swelling. You start engorging the leather that initially just with water it will have some swelling, but not to the point of like lime.
Well, why do you want to swell it?
You want to swell it to be able to, first of all, open up the fibers of your leather. Well, in this case, it's not leather; it's still hides. Because with that, you remember as a tanner, your objective is to penetrate, but you have to go inside with the metals.
Nice.
So you have to bind the metals inside that leather with the collagen. So the more surface area you have, the better you need. So you need to have more reactive sites in order for it to go. So that's why you lime it to engorge, but also to start prepping it for the dehairing, the unhairing, because there is, with the calcium hydroxide, it does help in breaking and loosening up the keratin inside the hair follicles. Well, the follicles are based in there, but the next step after that is the unhairing, which is the burn.
Well, let's talk about, so have you ever seen have you ever seen a gangster movie where they kill somebody and they have to get rid of the body? No?
I have not seen that.
Okay, so they kill the guy, they whack him, and then they throw him in a grave, and they cover him in lime. Probably for the same reason? Is it corrosive?
You increase the pH. On top of that is also you have the properties that you won't have any like bacteria thriving in there as well. It's another bonus part of it, because by increasing the pH, a lot of the bacteria don't like to live in a high pH. There is bacteria that can endure high pH environments, but for the most of them, they're going to stop. They're not going to stop reproducing, so they're not going to.
Well, somebody was talking about you being a supervillain earlier, and if you wanted to get rid of a body, would you pour lime on it?
No, you put lime on it just for it won't stink. I mean, at least that's
what it is.
If you really think about it, you throw it in there, it's not going to smell, because a lot of the bacteria aren't going to form, and that's the reason you smell, because there's production.
So it doesn't like disintegrate the body.
Well, it's not acid. It's.
Well, I don't know.
Breaking Bad. You see Breaking Bad, and that guy drops hydrofluoric acid, and he melts that one there. But no, but in terms of lime, it's to control. Also, you can use it to control for bacterial prevention of growth.
Okay, so
But
they do that so nobody can detect it.
But it acts more of a secondary. It's a secondary function. But the primary function at least is to engorge and open up.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to and let's look at questions here. Lye or lime? I don't really know the difference.
No, lime is a good question.
We don't know what lye is, but it's lime is what we are using, or is it the same? Esteban is looking that up, and the FBI has entered the chat. Yeah, I mean, maybe I'm the only one that's recalled where they pour bags of lime all over the bodies, the gangsters. But
so this is another.
Let's talk about lye.
Chemistry. Lye is an alkaline. It's a strong alkaline with potassium hydroxide. Now, see, theoretically, you can use that, but it's going to be more difficult to try. It's the same thing that you could use sodium hydroxide to try to increase your pH. But the problem is, you're going to have a hard time trying to get that out of when you're moving on to
rinse it out.
Yeah. Calcium hydroxide is much easier to move out when you're deliming as opposed to when you use KOH, or you could theoretically you can use any base to raise up that pH and cause it to swell, but ideally you don't want that. But good question. Lye.
Yeah, so confirmed we use lime and not lye. I think in gangster movies they use lye on bodies. Gosh, maybe I didn't get that right. Okay, good one, Chris. Marco says, who decides what to make with the leather, whether the leather is for shoes, jackets, footballs, etc.? That's an interesting question. And the only person that gets to decide is the manufacturer. And I suppose, actually, it's really the customer and indirectly the manufacturer, because we don't make, at Horween, we only really have two worlds of tannages, that base tannages we're talking, chrome tan and vegetable tan. And those can turn into many different retannages, which will go, I want to have Esteban back because I didn't realize how deep this just base tannage conversation would get. Yeah, the DSLRs turned off on us earlier. But there's so much we can talk about with retannage. You can turn these chrome tan leathers into something called combination tan leathers, which can be used for many different things. These Oak Street boots, by the way, these are trench boots. I don't know if I mentioned that earlier. These are actually made with a combination tanned leather, which is chrome tanned with a vegetable retannage. So the concept that you're asking about is kind of weird because it could be the person that buys the leather gets to determine what it's going to be, because I could use a jacket as like a blanket if I wanted. It doesn't have to be a jacket. But generally speaking, where do we tend to find veg tan leathers and where do we find chrome tan? This is something you're comfortable answering?
I mean, in veg tan, you really want to have something that's, it depends on the application if you want.
Well, like what application, right? Yeah.
I mean, like, for example, with veg tan, you're going to have something bright, patina, you're going to have maybe like a wallet, something that's bright. But, it's going to have, just by the temperature the shrinkage temperature is going to be different with veg tan as opposed to the chrome. So, I mean, do you really want, I'm a chrome guy. I like chrome maybe because I've seen the metals all the time. And I like something that has a stronger built at a personal side of my biases. I like something that will last. Obviously, they both last longer, but chrome has a stronger bind just a simple fact that it's a metal. It's a metal infused in organic matter, as opposed to the veg tan. Well, it's all organic. And sure, you're going to have some sort of different inorganics mix into it to last longer. But realistically, that's the key difference is that depending on the application, like chrome boots, right? I mean,
yeah. Well, it's combination tan. You got the veg,
but the base, but the full thing is chrome, and then you retan it with some veg, so it'll give you those. So tying just a little thing about the retan, like when you retan stuff, you use it to try to manipulate your overall outcome. So let's say I want a pull up, and I want to have this little patina forming. But you can't have that only if it's straight chrome. If it's straight chrome and you finish it.
It is what it is.
You finish it, it's done. Like it's more of it feels industrial, which is cool because it's strong, but you can have the best of both worlds when you retan. So it's it's different applications, but
yeah. And one of the coolest old examples that I can think of is way back in the day, we're talking World War I, Horween was making razor strops, which is really popular in the shell cordovan. But when they started to move away from razor strops, they started to get into more chrome tan leathers and also more. Let me back up. They got away from just horse hides and they started to get into side leather. So we started to see these sides get used in World War I for motor seals in these tanks. And the reason that they wanted to use the veg seals was because the veg, does it swell more? It's because they can mold it to a shape, and then it would fit around the seal more properly. But I guess also there was a really cool thing where these vegetable tan gasket seals, I don't know what they really were, they would slowly break over time. So the person driving a tank or a truck would be able to hear this seal slowly breaking, and then they'd be able to replace it. So veg tan is good for something like that, where you have to mold it to a shape. Where else have I seen it? There's tons of really cool stuff. Like gun holsters are really, really cool to look at. I believe Crossbreed makes a lot of really cool gun holsters where they take a piece of veg, actually the veg strips that Horween sells, and they dampen them, and then they force them around a metal form, and they let it dry like that. And veg tends to hold its shape, but it also tends to develop more patina, where chrome tends to be a lot more soft and supple. Probably something more for like a jacket or like a upholstery. And it's also really heat resistant. Let's look at some more questions here.
Got a really good question here about the benefits combination again. Yes. On top of my head, I could probably say that. I mean,
best of both worlds,
when you get the best, you get a synergistic, like I said before, because when you're tanning at its root inside that middle point of where the leather is, you're getting that hardness again of metal, of that high temperature, sustainability. But then when you retan it, that's the key differences in tanning, because you can fix something. What you want is you want to introduce your chrome inside and then slowly remove it as you're getting out, because you don't want to start tanning in the middle and right in the outside and forgetting about the inside, because then you won't have a fully tan. So what you can do is you can retan as you're going out with chrome, and then introduce a new veg tan to try to give the appearance of vegetable tan. So you would get an example is like light fastness. Light fastness is brighter with veg as opposed to chrome. So you can get that combination when you do those benefits.
What do you mean by brighter?
So I mean the actual, like when you finish it, you'll have better color aspects and attachments depending
on veg. I thought the colors were brighter on chrome, or more because my observation is that the veg stuff tends to be more earthy, earth tones. Mm-hmm. Although you can stain them, but they're always kind of like that darker, sort of earthy color. They're always sort of shades of brown. Is that incorrect? I don't know. And then the veg stuff, I tend to see more bright colors, but I don't know. But what's cool about combination tan, Chrome Excel, that's how it got its name. It's one of the first leathers that Horween made that was chrome tanned. And they knew an awful lot about vegetable tanning. So what they did was they made this chrome tan base tannage, which is exactly what we're talking about today. And then they imparted a retannage on top of that base tannage that was veg, made more out of tree barks. So you get more of that aging characteristic, but you also get the strength and the heat resistance that the chrome tan leathers have. So before we get too far off topic, because we'll come back to questions, if you click up above, we've got a link to the infamous Wikipedia, which actually, regarding leather tanning, they're pretty accurate from what I've seen. But we're about a quarter of the way down on this Wikipedia page under beam house operations, and beam house is what we're talking about today. We've gone through soaking, and now we're going to move on to lime. We did liming. We got to go to unhairing, which we at Horween we do in a chemical process. Do you want to explain some unhairing?
Well, essentially,
it's kind of gross. All of them are gross.
I mean, what you want is going back to that whole concept where you want a clean slate in order to be able to penetrate with your tanning. So the first obstacle of that is your layer of hair. Like, we have small little tiny hairs here, depending on how hairy you are. A whole cow, has fur, like a pelt. It's essentially, it has a lot of it. So, what you need to do is remove that in order for you to have your proper chemicals to fully penetrate, not just your tanning, but also, your dyes. No, unless you're in the fur industry, that's a whole different.
Yeah, they do the hair on tan.
Yeah, you leave your hair intact there.
Actually, that's a good question. I hadn't thought about that. I'm glad you brought that up. So if I were to leave the hair on, and make a rug, would I do all these steps that I see under beam house operations with the exception of unhairing?
Correct.
Really? And then maybe just change the formulations around a little bit to be more gentle.
If you think about it, well, going back to the unhairing process of what it is that you have keratin is another protein that's with the hair, and so it's binded to the skin, and so what it does is that it's binded by cysteine bonds or disulfide bonds, if you will. So it's two sulfurs together and linked. So with the calcium hydroxide, it could assist, but it's not as active and strong to break that bond. When you start adding, sodium hydrosulfide into the mix, though that will literally attack that bond and break it. And so when you break that, then you can just easily it'll start coming off. Kind of like an example, Nair. Nair. Nair is this perfect analogy. You put it on, you let her wait, do its thing, and then just comes right off. Kind of the same concept. You're breaking those bonds, those cysteine bonds. So going back to that, it exposes that pelt, and then that's what you want. You want exposure.
Cheers, by the way. We didn't get to.
It doesn't taste like pistachios.
No, it doesn't. Let's talk about the beer. We're drinking Pipeworks Pistachio Jones Dog. This is a milk stout. Let me read it again. Milk stout with cacao nibs, lactose, vanilla beans, and natural pistachio flavors. I don't get any. It's delicious, right? It tastes good. I just don't get any pistachio.
It just tastes like a regular stout to me.
It tastes it. I guess it feels stronger than 8.5%. It feels like really powerful, but maybe it's because we drank a beer before this.
It's a primer.
Yeah.
Oh, good call, Chris. Big Nair Bill. I should have said something else. Rain. Let's go with rain. Backward one.
Yeah. All right. So we did the unhairing. Let's move on to deliming. Again, and I want to encourage everybody to ask any questions. We will come to your questions and definitely answer them. We have nothing to hide, and we want everybody to know what's up with leather tanning. So let's move on to deliming and baiting.
So after you got your own hair, right, that you achieved your goal in that particular stage. You removed your hair, you exposed your pelt. Now what? Well, remember, you just increased the pH from your lime because you had to engorge it. But now you can't operate because on the top of that, you still have an excessive amount of other proteins inside that piece of side. Your collagen is not the only thing in there. There's multiple ones like glycoproteins in there. There's keratin just came off. So what you need to do now is introduce something or a catalyst or an enzyme to start breaking away from all those non-essential proteins that we need that are not of interest for us to tan. So in order to do that, you need to delime to restore back to the pH is optimal for bait. So the bait itself is more or less like a cocktail of enzymes that will attack those proteins and start to break them away, and then they'll wash away. So with the deliming, that's where you're going back down. So if you're at pH 12, you're going to start aiming down to 8 and 9.
We'll explain why we need to lower the pH.
Going back to the restoring that optimal enzyme activity, because if it's too high of a pH, your enzyme, you can throw that bait in there and it's just going to be sitting there and it's not going to work.
Okay, I think you added terms ahead of schedule here. Oh. So baiting, what is this baiting like? I guess
it's proteolytic enzymes, or enzymes are like I don't know if everyone's familiar, like catalysts. It's something that it's something that you can use as a reactant. It will not be consumed in the reaction, and it will give you a product. So an example is a perfect example is like in your car. Your car has a catalyst, a catalytic converter at the bottom. You're shooting out CO when you're burning in your engine. The catalyst in a certain heat activates and will cause it to create CO2 emission. But the catalyst is still there. It hasn't been changed. It's still there. The same thing happens with the bait. The bait will serve as a function to bridge both of those proteins to start breaking, or one protein to break down, but it won't be consumed itself. It won't be inside your actual like leather, or in this case, the sides, because they're just intermediates in order to help assist to break that away.
So we're breaking away stuff we don't want.
You don't want any non-essential proteins.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, it's not like a broken record. One of the main interests is the collagen. Collagen is your protein that you want.
Is there more than just collagen that we want, or is it mostly collagen that we're
mostly collagen is what you want, because those are the ones that are going to start binding with your tanning agent.
Okay. So after baiting it, what you're saying is that mainly what we have is a net of collagen without all the crap we want, and it's a certain pH.
Yes. Once you start removing from the bait, when your bait, that's why right after the bait is completed, you wash all that stuff away and introduce into the next.
Well, let's go into pickling then, which is the next step.
The next step essentially is, everyone's seen a pickle.
Yeah.
It's all shriveled and weird and soft, as opposed to a cucumber is strong. But it's because you're adding a basic acid, salt, and water. You need acid to drive. Now, going back, you rose up your pH in the lime, you're deliming, going back to an optimal for your bait. and now you're going down and pickling because you want a really low pH, not just for preserving the side, depending on how long you have it in the pickle, it's preserved and safe and it won't rot. But also you're driving the pH down for chrome to be accepted because chrome is really picky.
And that's the step after this. So we're
Yeah.
prepping.
You're prepping. All these steps are prepping your leather in order
to accept a tanning.
To accept your tanning.
Yeah. Okay. So
on top
give me a nutshell, like summary on pickling. Just lowers
pH and preps it for your tanning agent. And after that, it also uses as a preservative because you can preserve because at just how it was at high pH with your lime, a lot of not all bacterial growth will form. The same thing will happen at a lower pH. But I forgot to mention as well, and when it comes to liming, and the same thing in pickling, both sides of the spectrums are pretty wide, and it could cause overswelling of both. So if you have too much of a pickle, strong acid, and that solution, you're going to cause it to start to disintegrate.
You make jello.
Your precious collagen you've been trying to clean, it's gone. The same thing.
The bonds are just broken.
Well, because the acid itself has to maintain a homeostasis, if you will, like a balance in your solution. But if it's too strong, it'll start to eat away into the protein, and it'll start to break apart the protein, just how the baits do for the non-essentials. Certain baits, because and going back to the enzymes, is that those proteolytic enzymes are specific to certain proteins, not to the collagen. There is collagen break enzymes, but obviously you wouldn't want to use this. So those are just selective to certain ones, and that's why you can use it and it won't destroy your collagen. But in terms of pickle, salt, to maintain a buffer in solution, that's why also to prevent from over acidity and destroying your collagen, and your acid to drive it down, and your water obviously to maintain your solution.
You said with the does this have to do with putrefaction? Like
yes, for preservation. Yeah.
If you weren't to pickle it and you were to leave it at the baiting stage,
well, it's the
would
lime.
it still rot and turn into dirt?
Once the bait is just because as soon as you release it, it disintegrates the proteins. Remember, you still have your collagen there, and that's still organic matter. Just a matter of time as it'll just start to eat away. So you're still in a delicate process. So you really have to be quick, and you can't leave it. That's why with pickling it's much easier. That's why you have them in your drawers. Just have olives just sitting there in your juice. But if you remove that juice, those olives are really going to shrink. So you need to maintain that solution inside the pickles.
Gotcha. Chris is telling me to keep it together. I must be losing it here. So now we get to where the real business happens, right?
The magic. That's where
this is the magic. I could read. There's 4 huge paragraphs here on chrome tanning, but I don't like reading, so maybe you can just summarize it.
Well, for summary and to keep it, not too broad, chrome once it's ready. Again, how I briefly mentioned that there's ligands on the metal salts. It's something called olation, which means that the metal will bind to the ligand, and then they'll start to make these webs. So you have one collagen on the metal. This is collagen. Holding my hand, this is another collagen. One grabs my foot, the other one grabs that one, and I'm just like someone grabs my head. I'm just like wrapped around. I'm the metal. So that's the olation, and it's happening. But you need to.
That's happening with collagen.
No, that's collagen and chrome at the same time. But now you have, as a tanner, one of the biggest things is you have to be able to control the amount of the rate of penetration and the rate of reaction. So reaction is me binding to the ligands and also the penetration, meaning my chrome could go inside that side to be able to tan inside the leather. Because the first thing that's going to hit as soon as it's in that drum is the surface, the grain, the flesh, all that starts to come in contact with the chrome. So that's why you need a slow reaction. So that's why you drive the pH down, because at the pH down, you'll have a nice complex and stable, but it won't start fixating, which in the next, that's why something is called base specification. So essentially, you start to drive your pH up. And so when you're driving it up, let's say around 3-4, you start having fixation, because now not only are the ligands binding to me, I'm the chrome, but let's say another buddy of mine is another chrome and also is tied up with a bunch of ligands. Now we're going to bond. So now you're just making it's called polymerization of people, of all these chromes just coming together. You're just like solidifying. And so then you don't want that unless you have full penetration inside the leather. Because if not,
sit up on top.
Yeah, if it stays outside, it's like uncooked, because you open it up and see, well, my steak is still raw in there. It's just seared. I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't like unseared leather. I like it fully cooked, well done. In this case,
Well
steaks.
done.
This is a well done steak, not a medium rare. But yeah, that's what chrome tends to do. So you have olation, bonding to ligands, and oxalation when you start bonding with bridges of other metals. And
Okay.
that fusion, that cross linking, is what makes, going back to the whole chrome tanning, making it really strong. Because think about it, you have some of the collagens and you have metals just attached to you, and there's just a big web.
The way you comically described it to me earlier was that you're making like a cyborg.
Oh yeah,
It's
it's like Wolverine. You got adamantium. Yeah, you have metal, adamantium inside your bones instead of it. But that's what you're doing. You're fusing metal with organic matter,
right.
and that's why it lasts so long and it's strong.
Okay, we got some questions here. It's Chris again. So the rate of bonding is what prevents it from being rare inside.
Oh, well, to answer the adjustment is that what you have to do is you have to make sure, one, the pH is a big governing, and time. And also, that's why you also have these other things called masking. So it's masking effect. So you introduce other species or other pretty much chemicals that will help compete with your chrome. So it gives it a control rate on top of your pH being more stable, but the masking itself is as a mask, covers it up. So it helps it slowly get into the leather. Because if you don't have any, that's why some tanners, if they always have their masking agents, because it'll help control that. It's a really difficult process. Same thing with veg tan. If you have a high concentration of your tannin into that pit, likelihood is you're gonna have improper uncooked leather, because it's too high of a concentration. So that's why some tanneries have their systems that they bring it down to the diluted concentration of it at a certain amount of time, they increase it and they move it again. So it has a slow increase of rate, because you want to marinate it. It's like, it's a marinade. Think of it as a marinade. You want to marinate it.
So if you, what pH do you lower it to get the chrome to penetrate through the fibers?
Usually you want 2.8 to 3.5 is roughly where you want. And essentially that's kind of like the same pH where your pickle's at. So right before you start throwing your chrome in there, in the pickle, you do these checks. You make sure you put your pH indicators, and it shows you it's basically just visual, and you see where is your site at, what pH.
So if you left it,
and also you check your liquors and stuff like that.
If you left your pH around 3 is probably a good number, right? So if you left your pH of the hide around 3 and you introduced chrome salts, could you let it sit at that pH for a long time and it would just overflow with chrome salts?
It could, but it won't mask. It won't fixate. It won't, and that's what you want.
I thought you fixed it by raising the pH.
That's why. But if you just leave it at a lower pH,
if you left it there too long, like if you left it there for twice the prescribed amount, would it accumulate so much chrome and it wouldn't be desirable at that point? Is that what you're saying?
No, not necessarily. Because the thing is that what you want a certain amount, because you might, like you said, if you oversaturate it, then at that point it might just be too much for it to actually fix it. So you want a certain amount of progression. There's only a certain amount of that you want. You only take up a lot of the offer of the chrome. It's pretty like 2-3% of chrome. I'll fact check you for sure, but that's last time I checked, it was 3-4, as opposed to like veg tan, you're consuming 20% of your vegetables.
So explain that to me a little bit more. Consuming, what do you mean?
So there's only so much finite inside the leather where it can like an overall offering based of the think of it as a macroscopic of I'm the chrome and this is all the buddies are the collagen. There's only so much finite where I'm going to bind to, and then after that it just becomes excessive. You max out at a much, as opposed to vegetable tan, going again with the polyphenols. There's smaller components that they only bind to one at a time, so that way you can saturate more. But in terms of chrome, there's only a saturation point that goes, and after that it's just excessive, because most of the time that's what happens.
Yeah. Okay. So you lower pH, introduce chrome, and then slowly
raise up the pH, yeah.
And it's fixed.
You're fixating
inside that net of collagen,
yes.
And that's it.
Or cross-linking, that's the famous word. Yeah,
cross. Is that on the
I think it's on the famous Wikipedia at some point. Where you say
yeah, I see it right here.
Cross-linking by polychromial species. Polychromial, because it's more than one.
There you go.
Any other questions here? Let's see.
It's just Chris at this point.
Let's see. And if you get that wrong, the center is left untouched. It will not just be weird and bad leather. That's true. I mean, not true, but that's a good point. What you're not going to get the same quality. You're not going to get again what the objective was to try to strengthen your leather and have it strong. Because think about it, you're only going to have the outside strong and the inside is going to be wobbly. It could theoretically be protected because the bacteria won't penetrate inside, but it's not going to be a strong leather. And eventually, depending on how much to wear, you start seeing it.
Well, so why did maybe this is too dramatic of a change of subject, but this is on the last live stream, I took my veg tanned key case here, and it actually very easily just ripped by pulling it apart. Now, why, I would imagine, and I could easily test it, I just don't have one here. Why is it that this veg tan would just rip like that, where the chrome tan stuff wouldn't? Are the bonds different in some way?
I mean, the vegetable tannings they perform covalent bonds. They do. I mean, but the thing is, think about the difference between, again, the polyphenol. If you look at the ring and you look at where it's connected, it's an oxygen. It's one oxygen and it's binding to your collagens, as opposed to your metal. It's binding with 6 or 7 different ligands. It's like that metal, you have to rip this part, this one, as opposed to one. But this is, you're talking about the microscopic level of all these ligands for the polyphenols are smaller. There's a lot of them, but there's smaller bonds. And so the strength of them are still strong because it's not going to rip like paper, but
It kind of did, honestly. Maybe this is just, I picked a bad
Well, also the thickness has something to play as well.
So because I'm super strong, I've already ripped the one side, but just see how easily that rips. From the opening, the one that's already, no. Try to rip it from this little hole. I'm showing them this piece that hasn't been ripped, and I want them to rip it like that. I mean, it's pretty easy, right?
Yeah. Well, next time I'll bring we'll grab a chrome one. We'll see if we can.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like easily ripped. I don't know. So what you're saying is the bonds are lesser.
They're strong. Well, also, but there's less of them, but also there's a stronger hold with the chrome. At least that's how my assumption would be with metals. Because think about it, the metal, not only when it comes to these certain bonds, you're having stronger bonds holding them together, and then just more than one. So you're having much more like strength in order to tear it.
Is this something you would call in the lab that you run at Horween, by the way? Is this something you call a slit tear test?
Correct. Yes. You grab any physical piece and you'll go ahead and test it on how much force it requires. Now, there's a lot of variation. Tannage. What you put into it.
How many slit tear tests do you run a year? Thousands? Hundreds?
Hundreds. A couple, 200-300.
In your observation.
But again, it's arbitrary because it depends on the thickness.
This is thick.
If you're talking about 9,
talk about how thick that is. It's super thick. And it just rips.
Is this 9 or 10 ounces?
It feels like it could be around 8 or 9. Yeah. It feels thick.
I'll come back with this.
But you've tested tensile or slit tear tests on Chrome Excel, and I'd imagine it'd be much stronger. And the reason I bring this up is because I've seen some information on the internet where people praise veg, which I love veg. I actually know that you're in a Chrome camp. I'm probably more in the veg camp just because I love aging and patina. But I also want people to understand some of the downsides is this sort of rippiness of it. But that's the reason I bring this up is because I think there's something I had read online where people proclaim loudly that veg is super durable and strong. Well, it depends on how you're looking at it, right? If you're talking about slit tear, it's awful. It
depends on the force. Now you're getting into a physics sort of perspective. Slit tear as opposed to tensile tear,
right?
Because the fibers are going to be oriented in certain ways. But again, that's a good point. Definitely I'll bring back with more results on that. Definitely show you.
Yeah, do some slit tear.
I got some data here, and then it turns out that nope.
Are you gonna run tests? All right,
we'll run some tests now. Yeah.
All right, we'll run tests. So let's try to wrap up what is leather tanning in general, specifically chrome tanning. Maybe you can sort of summarize that for me because we've got 10 different paragraphs here of what it is, but maybe we can sort of summarize that down into a sentence or two. What do you think?
Chrome tanning objective is to get your species of chrome inside the hide and bind it with all the ligands of collagen. Once you have that, you have to further control the pH to raise it and solidify it, if you will, by causing multiple polymerizations of the chrome all around the area of this inside the side.
That is way different than I would have described.
I mean, in essence, that's how I see it. That's how I would.
It's because you're a chemist. That's why you have the shirt.
This young Star Wars, yeah.
I see it as the putrefaction aspect, like we're trying to make it not rot, and then the strength and the binding of the fibers.
Right, of course.
But I'm like,
those are the.
This
main
is
ones.
my understanding here. It's low tier. So we kind of went through all that. I'm gonna have Esteban back. We'll talk about retanning, but we do have. I kind of wrote ourselves some other questions, but we'd love to answer any questions that you guys have. So for everybody here, we encourage you to try to stump Esteban with chemistry. And more interestingly, I think would be to know what's in the leather that you're buying. Let's talk about like why are your boots great, or how to pick out a certain tannage for a wallet that you might want. We want you to have enough information so you can make an informed decision about whatever you're buying, and to know a little bit behind the scenes about the chemistry, which I think is really special. But let's go into some of the questions that I sort of pre-wrote here, unless anybody has any other ones. So I don't know if I didn't talk to you about these at all beforehand. So I don't know if you know the answer to this, but from your knowledge, what makes the Horween chrome tannage different than everybody else in the world? Or is it different? Is it the same?
You know, they have similarities because, you know, the science, the chemistry is there. We've been doing it for 100 years. But the key difference is it's how you control it and how you manage it. And I feel at least in Horween, you still have old school, same way, you know, the same ideology that we've been doing this for thousands of years. The method has been same. Nothing's really been changed in the procedure. And therefore, there's really less hands in the pot is better because you keep it consistent. And I think that's what Horween still does. It still keeps it consistent.
Yeah.
In terms of, you know, making wet blue and making all these chromes. Yeah, that's how I would see it. They try to not cheap out in certain aspects. And that's a lot what we see in a lot of the other tanneries, that they try to cheap out, try to push out production faster, and then what do you get? You get stuff that's not fully.
We see a lot of that at the and I have never worked at another tannery, but it's my understanding from looking at the inputs of other tanneries, wet end in specific, not necessarily the finishing procedures, but Horween puts a lot of material, like high quality stuff, into the retannage and the tannage parts. And something that I had heard Skip Horween talk a lot about is how the Horween chrome tan formula that we're kind of just talking about, the whole process, about how their chrome tan has a unique ability to plump up. It tends to get thicker in the tanning process at Horween, where a lot of tanneries are maximizing for yield. Horween's actually maximizing more about thickness. And I think the concept and the philosophy, to my understanding, is that the thicker the hide, the more it plumps inward as opposed to outward, is the better the break you will have on the leather. So like if you were to walk in a pair of boots and flex them, the amount of delamination of the grain layer from the fiber layer of the leather, we're talking about plumping that up so you get less opportunity for those two layers to sort of delaminate and pebble up like that. They more stay together. So when they flex, they're well laminated, I suppose would be the word. But that's my understanding. I don't know if we don't have a lot of other experience with chrome tan, but let's see what else I got here for you. What's the best leather? That's simply what I wrote.
Arbitrary. Let's see, what do you mean?
Because that's what I get
in terms of finish.
Well, people ask me all the time, what's the best leather? Or how maybe we could make it easier and say, like, what's a good leather? How can you tell something is good? And I think before you answer, I'll tell you that I think this is a trick question.
I think it's a simple question. You stress test it.
Yeah.
You utilize it, you apply it, and you give it X amount of months. If you're still happy with the product and you know it's not cracking, it's not falling apart, so you're pretty good.
By that definition, this is terrible.
Well, I mean, if you're abusing it, I'm not openly ripping stuff. Yeah. I'm using it for what's intended. The manufacturer, see, that's abuse. That voids a warranty there.
Yeah, no, I agree.
But I mean, I guess that's how I see it. I mean, it's always important. There's always new discoveries of how to tan and how to make leather, and the best thing to do is just time is the best thing that promotes it, and seeing how long it can last. And I think that's the most important thing that
I think you say that, and I think you're probably right. I think you say that because you run physical tests all day. And for me, I try to picture somebody at a shoe store, and I try to picture how they determine what shoe or boot or jacket or whatever leather thing they're going to buy. And I try to imagine that confusion, because we see leather all day.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I can look at this and tell you it's veg, and I can make a lot of assumptions about this just because I've seen a lot of it and I've used it. But I think somebody looking at a pair of shoes on a shelf may have a hard time being able to tell. And I think this is why we see a lot of marketing spin words. I don't think there's an easy way to tell the longevity and the durability of something just by looking at it. I think you need to know more about the lineage. Like, get a leather from a reputable tannery. We are completely biased. We both are employed currently at Horween.
Yeah.
So maybe ignore our advice about Horween, but look up other tanneries and see what people have to say about it. See about people's experience with those leathers. And if they've had a positive experience, it's probably something pretty special, and it's probably something really good. If they have a negative experience, like actually somebody in the chat here showed me a pair of boots earlier today that were falling apart a little bit in a short amount of time. Maybe avoid tanneries that have that kind of reputation, but they don't really sell it on the shelf. They don't say this is by Horween. So maybe it's important to start asking that question. Like, hey, shoe salesperson, do you know anything about this leather? Where did it come from? Oh, you don't know? Go find out.
Right.
Because that's something I think that is the most important part, is the reputation of the tannery. And that's not something you can see just by looking at it on the shelf. And the other thing is that I really want to say that I think is super important is I think something is good if you think it's good. So it's a little confusing, but if you're at the shoe store and you're looking on the shelf and you don't know what's good, but you see one that catches your eye and you think it looks awesome, that's probably the one you want to get. I think you should buy something that you think looks special. And it doesn't matter if it's full grain. It doesn't matter if it's chrome tan. It doesn't matter if it's veg tan. If you just think it looks great, I think that's something that you should get. And to me, that's the best advice I can give, is try to avoid the spin and try to avoid the marketing words and just go with what you like, because at the end of the day, there is no wrong and there is no right. It's just what you think is cool.
Although the smell is also another key.
Smells cool.
Smell it. Some smell like paint. I'm not a big fan of that one.
I wish this beer smelled like pistachio, by the way. But
yeah, this
the veg smells crazy. Yeah. It smells so good.
That's what you do with combinations. Still got that base.
So unless there's any other questions, I think we're going to try to wrap it up here. I really appreciate, Esteban. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for letting me answer as much as I can. And
we're going to do this again because I really learned a lot from you.
It's an interesting concept coming from a biochem background and implementing that into the tanning field. Like I said, it's like I said in the beginning, it's a whole new world. It's uncharted territory, which is great.
As much as I learned about the tanning, I think you might be able to blow my mind again with the retanning, because maybe we'll be able to sneak preview here, but retanning is more, it's an infinite amount of these tannages that you can put on top of the tannage. So there's so much of an open world.
Even the plot twist with fat liquoring, that's a whole another concept.
We can talk about fat liquoring. We can talk about hot stuffing, wet stuffing, currying.
But I guess for this particular episode, it's about how do you get to something that's raw and something that's considered leather. I think that's the take-home message. Hopefully, I try to illustrate with my movements here.
Yeah, it looks like we got one more question here from Chris again. Thanks, Chris. Or did he already answer this? And if you get that wrong and the center is left untouchable at rot, or we answered that one. All right, everybody. Unless there's any other questions, I super appreciate you guys being here and checking this out. Our goal is to just give you as much detailed information as we can so you can make a good choice with whatever you're buying. And looking forward to that Octuple Mercury Tan Color 4.
All right, I'll give it to you in a PPE sheet, and I'll hand you that wallet.
All right, thanks everybody. Thanks so much for checking this out and hanging out with us. One more time, we had the Pipeworks Pistachio Jones Dog, which did not taste like pistachio, and we had We had the trench boot from Oak Street, which I think looks really cool. I love that they're unlined. I'm sort of a sucker for unlined boots these days. I don't know if I told you about that. And we had Esteban from Horween Leather Company, huge valuable resource for all of us here. And again, thanks everybody. Really appreciate you guys. Take care. See ya. Yeah.